So are we already in the throes of the early stages of jockeying for positions in the 2027 presidential election, which is still some 3 years away? Well, if you've been following the news here on Arise TV and elsewhere, you would have heard the rising volume of the political chatter led by northern politicians who've been holding unification meetings and declaring in clear terms that they are positioning for 2027. But it's drawn the scorn of many southern politicians who are accusing the North of acting as if they have an entitlement to power. They say that after ruling Nigeria for 48 of its 64 years of independence, the North has left this country, especially their own northern region, mired in the economic, social, and political rot that it currently is in. But northern politicians counter by saying that under President Tinubu, this country has never had it so bad. So, in the face of what many see as an ailing, failing economy, and against the backdrop of the growing opposition from the huge voting bloc that the North represents, can President Tinubu repeat his 2023 feat and hold on to power in 2027? Or will the cable be cut? Well, for his take on this and other issues, I'm joined now on the line from our studios in Lagos by Dr. Doyin Okupe, who used to be the Special Assistant on Media and Publicity to President Olusegun Obasanjo and was the Senior Special Assistant on Public Affairs to President Goodluck Jonathan. And lest we forget, he was also the former Director General of the P2B presidential campaign. Thank you very much indeed, Dr. Okupe, for joining us, and thank you for coming in. I noticed you were sort of wandering up the street trying to figure out where the studio is, but I'm glad you found it, and we're very happy to have you in the chair. Let's start by talking about the positioning for power in 2027. The North have started trying to align that movement in their favor. They're uniting various groups under the umbrella of the League of Northern Democrats with a view to returning to power, or power to the North, or to a candidate, as they put it, who is in sync with the North in 2027. Do you think that scenario is plausible, given the inescapable fact that the North has ruled Nigeria for nearly 50 of its 64 years of independence, and most recently after 8 years of President Buhari, from whom a southern president took over just 18 months ago?
Thank you, Charles. The question you've asked is not that straightforward. The truth is that there are stakeholders in this country, and there are ways that this country has been managed since 1960, since independence. The country may not have made giant strides economically and in terms of provisions of what will suit or make the populace comfortable. But in terms of its politics, we have managed it in a way that it has kept the country together. I want to remind you that when Obasanjo became president, there was an unwritten national consensus, that a Southwestern person, somebody from the Southwest, will be president. Because if you looked at it, the two candidates for that election were Obasanjo and Olufalaye. So head and tail, Southwest wins. That was a national concession. And it was not for nothing. It was because the stakeholders felt that at that point in time, immediately following Abiola's death, who was presumed to have won an election, there was a need to assuage the Southwest. It was not a question of northern interest. You see, those who control the affairs of this nation in terms of politics before now were more interested in national interest than sectional interest. And our failure to evolve a national elite system is one of the most fundamental problems why Nigeria is stagnating, because we all pull in different directions. Now, coming specifically to your question, I see a lot of young people, young minds, brilliant minds from the North coming together, which is a good thing. The North needs its political elites to come together for whatever reasons, even if only to shoulder the responsibility of the burden of neglect of the masses for so long. But, for 2027, we politicians, and I say that authoritatively, without any fear of contradiction or equivocation, I am part of this system. I am in this system. I understand this system. In 2027, power cannot return to the North yet. That's not how we do it. We rotate between the North and the South. The North does 8 years, at the end of which the South does 8 years. So I'm not saying that Bola Tinubu must be president in 2027, but he's not going to be a Northerner. That is not it, And the fact, what we see in recent times is that the slightest, the simplest thing that some of our young people in the North consider to be irritable, then the question is that, okay, we will show our hand in 2027. We will speak in 2027. This country was brought together by not even coercion, by cooperation, understanding, and concession on all fronts. There were times when, the North did not have the requisite people to fill positions in the federal system. There was a concession that the North must be accommodated. We had things like federal character because of that. We've had things like, even if you look at JAMB, what somebody in Abia scores and does not, he cannot enter university. Somebody elsewhere in the North scores less than 20% of that and is admitted, because we believe that the North is educationally disadvantaged. This is how we have run this country. We have run this country with a lot of collaboration, with a lot of brotherhood, with a lot of patriotism. It's not this brigandry, threatening that, okay, we will do this. The North must, if you look at Babangida, President Babangida, President Obasanjo, Abdul Salam, and General Ibrahim, these are, and Tiwa Janjuma, these are some of the people who have managed the affairs of this country in terms of political balancing for the last 25 years. They're growing lesser in influence, they're dwindling in consideration, and they're advancing in age. But unfortunately, and I regret to say this, they have not been able to raise, an elite class, younger group, that can effectively take over from them along the same platforms on which we have grounded this polity that it is the way it is today.
That's a good opening analysis. Nevertheless, some people have suggested that the best way forward for the North in 2027 is to find a Southern candidate to support, which is along the lines of what you're hinting at, rather than field a Northern candidate, because this would honor and respect the agreement which allows each region to do 8 years. But the North has countered by saying that if they were to field a Southern candidate in 2027, that candidate would also want to do 8 years, which would, breach that 8-year rotation plan for the North to fulfill its presidential allocation. What do you think of that?
It's a political quagmire. If the North decides to field another Southern candidate against Bola Tinubu, the North will have shot itself in the leg. Don't forget, this is a third world country. Let us assume that you bring a new person and he wins. There's no agreement he will make with you. He will not spend another 8 years. So, you just extended the lifespan of the rotation to the South by another 4 years. So why don't we, what has Bola Tinubu done? Let's come to terms with this. What has Bola Tinubu done? Bola Tinubu has come with very serious reforms, that will take the country away from, the situation in which it had been undergoing for the past 8 to 10 years. I will say it here on public television. This is the truth. This government has not been able to articulate this position, but those of us who are watching from the outside, we can see it. As of the time that the Bola Tinubu administration was coming into power, the country was finished, was socially, economically finished. We were spending 98% of our revenue. 98 cents on every dollar was being used for debt servicing. We were subsidizing fuel, we were subsidizing power, we were subsidizing virtually everything. There was there was very severe and serious arbitrage in the foreign exchange market. Now, so what did the Buhari administration do? They just went ahead and printed and continued to print money, until they printed up to 30 trillion. So Nigerians did not feel it because it was, the money was still being available, although it was not backed by anything. There are a few countries that have done this in the past. So it's not a matter of Nigeria is rich. Venezuela is extremely, one of the largest reservoirs of crude oil in the world. The poverty in Venezuela is worse than here. And I will show you something. This is Zimbabwe dollar. On this paper, or on this currency, is $100 trillion. Zimbabwe dollar, 100 trillion. It is probably worth about $15, $16, or $17. It will not buy in Zimbabwe 2 live fowls. Now, this is what Bola Tinubu has saved Nigeria from. If Bola Tinubu wanted to be popular and wanted to be, for him to be sang and all that, he would just go back and continue what was being done before, continue to print money until, God forbid, we approach this level. And, I have had people complain, which is legitimate, that dollar is 1,700. It could have been worse. It could have been 17,000. That fuel is 1,000. It could have been worse. It could have been 3,000 or 4,000 per liter if these reforms had not been in place and has checked the escalating hyperinflation in which we entered into after Bola Tinubu's administration. It is wholesomely unfair.
Right.
And I'm almost tempted to say wicked for anybody to judge this administration after 18 months.
Well, can I say this?
Go and check the history of reformers.
Right. I think you've made some good points there, but the fact is, Dr. Okupe, there is no debate, is there? The cost of living crisis is evidently happening. It's biting very hard. Manufacturing is collapsing. Foreign investors are not coming in, and those that are here are leaving because of a foreign exchange crunch, a lack of infrastructure such as electricity, which is also killing domestic industries. Poverty is growing, economic losses are growing and have been growing for the last 9.5 years of an APC government. And all that is baked into the failure of the government's reform policies, because you need all those trends to be reversed for those policies to work, don't you? So there is no debate that this country's trajectory is a real and present danger to the survival and failure of Nigerians. And it's simply not clear where the government is going to find the leverage to change that. Go ahead.
Now, can I come in here?
Yes.
Charles, you know, you are on a wrong premise to be saying 9.5 years of APC government. Doyin Okupe, when APC was formed, I publicly declared it, you know, a conglomerate of strange bedfellows. I was laughed at, I was scorned by many people, but, you know, today it is quite, I saw it. Today it is quite clear that APC was made up of various political fragments, CPC, ACN, APGA, etc., etc. And, you know, these were immiscible liquids. Yes, it is true that it is APC government, but, you know, in this country, you know, we will have to be able to be more discerning. You know, Bola Tinubu cannot be held responsible for the government before him. Yes, people have argued that he was the principal character that brought Buhari. When Buhari was brought up as a candidate, more than half of the population of Nigeria jubilated. So, you know, we all assumed that, you know, the general was going to do well. The Yoruba people say that, look, you know, if the masquerade has already given birth to his child and the child cannot dance, that's the problem of the child. Not the problem of the masquerade that birthed it. So, you know, what you also said on the issue of manufacturing, on the issue of, you know, foreign direct investment and all that, you know, recent events have proven that to be wrong. Today, the MBS came up with their report to show that there's a 3-point-something percent growth in GDP. And the manufacturing that you mentioned was part and parcel of that growth. There was growth in the manufacturing sector in the last quarter of this year than previous year, and the foreign direct investment is also increasing. And let me tell you, I told you that Buhari printed 30 trillion, which attracted about 7 trillion interest. That 7 trillion interest has been paid by Bola Tinubu. The airlines were being owed about $7 billion, and it was, you know, traveling by Nigerians will have been crippled, or Lagos, London will have come to something like 12 million naira for economy. But, you know, this administration, in less than 1 year, has sorted that out. We must, these reforms that are in place are beginning to show signs of productivity. So, there's, you know, when you go into the generalization that 9.5 years, that is not true, that is not correct. Let us agree, let us be factual, let us know, you know, that, okay, this is where this administration started, this is where they say they're going, this is how far they're going. And then we support the administration to achieve its objective, not to castigate and bring it down and demonize it.
Right. Well, I mean, maybe there should have been a government-issued pamphlet sent to Nigerians by the Tinubu administration advising people how to prepare and cope in the event of the economic crisis that they were unleashing on the Nigerian people. Maybe that might have helped, because the numbers that you're quoting means absolutely nothing.
The government is not unleashing.
Let me just make the point. The numbers you're quoting mean absolutely nothing for the tens of millions of Nigerians who've been pushed into extreme poverty, and for a lot of the people who are living on the street, walking down the streets, and a lot of people who are middle class who have been pushed into a lower income bracket. I mean, when you look at the growing restlessness in the north, which is what we started this discussion with, in the southeast, the Niger Delta, which have come out, some of their leaders, to say they're no longer going to associate with President Tinubu, and even parts of the southwest, one would be forgiven for thinking that this country is on the cusp of a major breakdown. What do you think can change that and get everyone to rally round the Tinubu government? If he's doing all these great things you say he's doing, why aren't people rallying around him?
Charles, the lifespan of an administration in the first instance is 4 years, is only 4 years. If you have had a rottenness that was unabated for more than 8 years, you think it can be fixed in 8 months? It cannot. I personally feel that whoever wanted to run for president after a Buhari administration, must have lost his mind. Because, why are we developing selective amnesia, especially we elites? We had a country that for 8 years was totally, socially, economically, financially unattended to. And yet, in all those 8 years, there were no threats, there were no complaints, there was silence from everywhere. Everywhere was was in a state of acquiescence. Now, somebody else now takes over this rottenness, and before he can even sit down on the seat, you're saying that you just mentioned now that there's a lot of childhood restlessness, or youth restlessness in the North. The North has been having increasing number of out-of-school children, for the last 8 years, or for the last 9 years or more. Today, there are about 20 million out-of-school children. The Almajiri schools that President Goodluck Jonathan built were abandoned and discarded. Now, if those Almajiri schools have been allowed to absorb some of the students on the street, the restlessness and restiveness will not have been at this height. Now, can you, in all honesty, Charles, you're an honest man, can you, be true to yourself and to your conscience and say Bola Tinubu caused all this? That is not true. That is not correct. I was telling you that, we've got a reformer in the villa. Somebody who is not desperate about power, who is not desperate about glamour. Somebody who says, I have stepped out and I'm not going to step back.
Right.
I take responsibility and I'm going to try to reform.
Right.
I'm going to try to reform this country. And he's doing it.
Well, let me ask you this.
Lee Kuan Yew took 31 years to reform Singapore.
Well, let me ask you this. Let me ask you this, Dr. Okupe, because you've said that, and I thank you for saying that I do try to be honest, and I would return the same compliment to you, that you also try to be honest. You are, beyond being a medical doctor, you're also an evangelist, so one would hope that you would be honest and straightforward. But wearing your hat, in that regard, wearing your hat as a former special advisor to two previous presidents, Olusegun Obasanjo and Goodluck Jonathan, do you think that in the wider context, opportunities and prospects for Nigerians have increased or decreased since that time?
Charles, I am a Christian, I am an evangelist, and I am a witness for Christ. I am not going to stand here for any reason. I do not desire to be minister or commissioner or anything. So I have little to gain. My point is just that I want the country to move forward and to succeed. And I'm not rabidly opposed to the gentleman that is there right now. The truth of the matter is that opportunities have long gone, flown out of perspectives. It is now with the pillars that are being laid down that new opportunities are now being created. Do you want to talk about the children who could not go to school because their parents, did not have money? It will have been worse now because people cannot even feed. That means a lot more of our youth will not be able to enter university. Today, Bola Tinubu has made poverty not to be an issue or an excuse not to be educated. There's a loan fund which he promised in his agenda that he's going to do that is now operative. There are so many programs for the youth, and there are so many ways of, there are so many plans to finance them that is currently going on. It will take time. And I know Nigerians are pain. They say T-Pain, which means Tinubu-Pain, but the truth of the matter is that it's not Tinubu-Pain, it is temporary pain for permanent gain. When there's a reform that is going on, there's nowhere any reform takes place that there are no temporary pains. And, if there are no pains, there are no gains. We must all go through. I remember very well when Ikorodu Road was being constructed. My late brother, Okupe, used to live in Okupe Estate. He got home every day, and his children, he got home at 1:30 a.m., 2:30 a.m. They suffered. It's not just him as a family. Many people on that axis suffered. But today, we drive to the Ikorodu Road in 12 minutes, in 10 minutes, in 20 seconds. A generation paid and suffered for that construction that was done in Metropolis at that time. So, a generation will have to go through some temporary pain so that, generations coming behind and even those who are still alive can enjoy a much more permanent gain. This opposition mantra, the problem with the Bola Tinubu is this. During the election, let me just land, very briefly. During the election, we had 4 major candidates. When you have strong candidates like that, it is difficult to amass enough votes to be able to have a majority. The Bola Tinubu administration came in with about 35, 36, 37% total votes. So those who are in opposition, who have lost, who are Africans by nature, who are bad losers, are those who are fanning this ember of criticism, of not doing well, of saying that, he has abandoned us. Elections are over, Charles. Nigerians must go back and let us look at the governance. Let us critically, unbiased and on prejudice, look at what work is being done.
Right. Okay. Well. Just I want to thank you very much indeed for joining us. Always brilliant talking with you. There are a lot of things I wanted to discuss with you, but I think we've kind of exhausted the time. But before we go, let me just make this point very quickly. I'm just getting a text from a very well-respected Nigerian economist who doesn't take any political sides. And it's a female, by the way. She is saying the numbers are clear. Tinubu's macroeconomic numbers are worse, period. Numbers don't lie. Things are getting worse, and the macroeconomic numbers don't support Doyin Okupe's claims. Unfortunately, you won't have a time to respond to that.
I disagree.
You won't have.
Well, I disagree, and I have an idea of who you are talking about.
It's fine that you disagree.
It's intellectual fraud.
We will have to leave
intellectual fraud.
We'll have to leave that
to say
for
that
another day.
It's intellectual fraud.
Right. I want to thank you.
I don't believe that, and it is not correct. It's
you've made that point.
It's part of the gang up and conspiracy.
Right. Okay. You've made that point. I want to thank you very much indeed. But it's always brilliant talking with you, because I have to say that you're extremely good at articulating your thoughts in a way that it can be understood by everybody. Dr. Doyin Okupe was the former special assistant on media and publicity to President Obasanjo, also former senior special assistant to President Goodluck Jonathan, and he was also the former director general of the Peter Obi presidential campaign. He was talking to me on the line there from our studios in Lagos.